Imagine being just a kid, sitting on a plane, excited for a trip. And suddenly, your world turns into a nightmare. A flight attendant targets Jaylen, a young boy, in the most horrifying way, right in front of everyone. What happens next will shock you, and it's something no one should ever have to endure. If you believe courage should always be seen and injustice should never be ignored, hit that like button, share this story, and subscribe for more powerful, real-life stories that reveal the strength of the human spirit. Stay with us, because what Jaylen faces on this flight will leave you speechless and inspired. The cabin was buzzing with the usual chatter of a late afternoon flight. Passengers settling in, tray tables clicking, phones lighting up. But for Jaylen, nothing felt normal. He fidgeted in his seat, trying to ignore the tension in the air that seemed to cling to him like a shadow. Across the aisle, Monica, the flight attendant with a sharp, almost unsettling smile, moved with a precision that sent a chill through the rows. At first, it was small things, her cold glance, the way she seemed to hover near him just a second too long, the tightening grip on the safety card she held. Jaylen shifted, gripping his seat, trying to tell himself he was imagining it. But then Monica approached, and everything changed. Without warning, she leaned down and pressed a plastic bag over Jaylen's face. Panic exploded inside him as the world narrowed to a single terrifying thought. He couldn't breathe. His lungs burned, his vision blurred, and the air around him felt like it was being ripped away. He kicked, he shouted, he gasped, but the sound barely left his throat. Marcus, sitting across the aisle, froze, his heart hammering. He reached out, ready to pull Monica away, but she was fast, controlling, almost robotic in her actions. Lisa, seated a few rows behind, had her phone in hand, but her fingers trembled. The chaos of screams and confusion surrounded them, yet in that moment, it felt like Jaylen was completely alone. Seconds stretched like hours. Jaylen's mind raced, flashes of home, his friends, his parents, everything he loved, colliding with the suffocating fear of what might happen if no one intervened. And then, just when it felt unbearable, he slipped, his consciousness fading, the world tilting into darkness. Passengers watched, frozen and horrified. Questions filled the cabin like static electricity. Why was this happening? Who would stop her? The plane seemed to hold its breath, the hum of engines masking the cries and the thumping panic that pulsed through Jaylen's body. How could a simple flight become a nightmare? What drove Monica to do something so cruel, so deliberate, in full view of dozens of terrified passengers? And most importantly, would Jaylen survive this unthinkable moment? Stay with me, because what happened next wasn't just shocking. It was something nobody on that flight could have predicted. Jaylen was 12, and the world around him felt safe, or at least as safe as a kid could hope for. He lived in a small suburban neighborhood where he knew every corner, every neighbor, every friendly face that waved as he biked past. School was a mix of laughter, homework, and basketball games in the park. Marcus, his father, worked long hours but always made it home for dinner. Their apartment was modest but warm, filled with the smell of Marcus's cooking and the soft hum of Jaylen's favorite songs playing from an old speaker in the living room. Jaylen loved flying kites, drawing comic sketches of superheroes he invented, and listening to stories about places he dreamed of visiting one day. He had a mischievous smile and a clever sense of humor that often made even the strictest teachers crack a grin. But despite his happiness, there were little cracks in the world around him, moments he barely noticed or tried to ignore. Whispers in the supermarket about kids like him, subtle avoidance from some parents at school, the occasional nervous glance when he walked past certain neighbors. He didn't yet understand them, but he felt the tension. Marcus always encouraged Jaylen to notice these things, to be proud of who he was, and to carry himself with dignity no matter what anyone said. People's ignorance isn't your problem, son. Just make sure it never touches your heart, Marcus often reminded him, his voice gentle but firm. Jaylen nodded, believing him, feeling safe under the shield of his father's guidance. The day started like any other. Jaylen was excited. School was over, and he and Marcus were going on a short trip to visit a distant aunt in another city. Jaylen had never been on a plane before. The idea of looking down at the clouds, seeing the world shrink beneath him, filled him with exhilaration. He packed his little backpack with snacks, his sketchbook, and a small action figure that always went with him, like a talisman for adventure. Marcus checked the tickets and passports, smiling at Jaylen's energy. The airport was busy but familiar in its chaos. Families hustled with luggage, announcements crackled over the speakers, and Jaylen's eyes darted from shop to shop, fascinated by everything. He clung close to Marcus, holding his hand tightly as they approached security. For the first time, he noticed the way some people seemed to glance at him differently, some with curiosity, others with a flicker of unease. He shrugged it off. After all, airports were confusing places for everyone. Boarding the plane brought a rush of excitement. Jaylen's heart raced as they walked down the aisle, the engines humming beneath their feet. He couldn't stop talking about how high up they'd be and how tiny the cars would look from above. Marcus smiled, happy to see his son so alive with wonder, but subtle tension already threaded the cabin air. A flight attendant, Monica, moved with brisk efficiency, her smile polite but clipped. Something about her gaze lingered on Jaylen, just a little too long, as if she were studying him in a way that made him uncomfortable. Marcus noticed it too, the slight tightening of his jaw when Monica passed by, but he didn't say anything, hoping it was just pre-flight nerves. Passengers settled in. Conversations hummed, and the plane began to taxi. To Jaylen, everything was magical. To Marcus, it was ordinary, just another flight. But under the surface, a storm was quietly gathering. Jaylen had no idea that the innocent joy he felt, the sense of safety he carried, was about to collide with a harsh, cruel reality that would test everything he thought he knew about the world. It would start small, an unsettling glance, a curt word, but grow into something that would leave Jaylen and everyone around him reeling. And when it happened, the people who seemed ordinary, polite, even trustworthy, would reveal a side that nobody expected. The first seeds of injustice were planted in that moment, quiet, almost invisible. And Jaylen was about to face a challenge that would push him to his limits and force everyone on that flight to witness the raw, unfiltered truth about prejudice, power, and fear. Jaylen had barely buckled his seatbelt when the first sign of trouble appeared. Monica, the flight attendant, returned to their row, clipboard in hand, and her eyes locked on him. At first, she asked standard questions, seat adjustments, life vests, but the tone in her voice carried an edge that made Jaylen shrink back slightly. He tried to smile politely, hoping it was just stress from the flight, but Monica's stare was unyielding, sharp, and strangely personal. Minutes passed. The hum of the engines filled the cabin, yet a subtle tension began to build around Jaylen. Monica returned again, this time more forceful. "Sit still, young man," she snapped. Her words were sharp, almost accusing, as though his very existence on that plane was a mistake. Passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Marcus tensed beside him, whispering, "It's okay, Jaylen, just ignore her." But ignoring her felt impossible. As the flight continued, Monica escalated her behavior. She questioned him repeatedly, demanding he remove his headphones and stop drawing in his sketchbook. Each command carried an unnecessary harshness. Other passengers glanced but hesitated to intervene. Lisa, sitting a few rows behind, felt a pit in her stomach. She wanted to speak up, but the subtle social pressure in the air, a mix of fear, uncertainty, and misplaced politeness, kept her silent. Then came the first public humiliation. Monica leaned over Jaylen's seat, her tone loud enough for the surrounding rows to hear. "Why are you acting like this? You're making everyone uncomfortable." Murmurs spread through the cabin. Jaylen's cheeks burned. The laughter of nearby kids and the quiet murmurs of adults felt like daggers twisting in his chest. Marcus's hands clenched around the armrest, his jaw tight. He could see the fear in his son's eyes and the growing shame that no parent should have to witness. Jaylen tried to explain, tried to reason with Monica, but his words seemed to vanish against her relentless insistence. "Stop it, sit properly." "Don't talk back," she barked. Each command felt like a nail in the coffin of his confidence. His heart pounded, his chest tightening, every breath a reminder of his helplessness. The systemic injustice became more apparent when the pilot's voice came over the intercom. Monica had reported Jaylen for disruptive behavior, painting him as a threat. The cabin now stared, eyes filled with suspicion, whispers spreading like wildfire. Jaylen could feel the weight of judgment pressing down on him. He wasn't just fighting Monica. He was fighting a world that seemed ready to believe the worst about him, without reason. By now, Lisa could no longer sit silently. She leaned forward, her voice shaking but firm. "He's just a kid. Leave him alone." Monica's glare snapped toward her, sharp as a knife, and for a moment, the tension in the cabin seemed to thicken, almost tangible. But Monica wasn't done. She moved with a deliberate, controlled precision, her next steps chilling. The turning point came suddenly. Monica, under the pretense of discipline, reached for a plastic bag. Jaylen froze. Panic hit him like a tidal wave. His stomach dropped, and the cabin seemed to shrink around him. What are you doing?" he stammered. His voice was trembling, caught between fear and disbelief. Marcus lunged forward instinctively, but Monica was too fast. The bag hovered over Jaylen's face, and the world narrowed into a horrifying tunnel of suffocating dread. He struggled, kicked, and gasped, but the grip was unrelenting. Every second felt like an eternity. The passengers, frozen, watched in horror. Lisa grabbed her phone, ready to record, but her hands trembled. The scene was unfolding like a nightmare no one could stop. Jaylen's vision blurred. His mind raced. Memories of home, of safety, of laughter, all colliding with the raw terror of helplessness. The plane was no longer a place of wonder. It was a cage, and Monica, calm and precise, had full control. At that moment, everything hung in the balance. Would someone act? Would Jaylen survive this unimaginable moment? And as the seconds stretched, the cabin held its collective breath, caught between fear, disbelief, and the urgent need for justice. But just when it seemed the horror would continue, something unexpected stirred, a whisper of defiance, a spark of courage that could change everything. Jaylen's lungs burned. Every inhalation felt like knives slicing through his chest. The plastic bag pressed relentlessly against his face, blurring the world into a haze of fear and panic. His arms flailed, kicking and pushing at Monica, but she held firm, her grip unyielding, a calm, terrifying force in the midst of chaos. The cabin was frozen. Some passengers whispered in horror. Some stared, paralyzed, unsure if they could intervene. Marcus's hands shook, his voice hoarse as he shouted, "Stop!" Let him breathe. But Monica's icy composure didn't waver. She moved with a precision that made Jaylen's heart sink. The plane's hum seemed distant now, muffled, almost irrelevant against the raw, suffocating terror pressing down on him. Jaylen's vision blurred. Black spots danced at the corners of his eyes. He felt the walls of the cabin close in. Memories flashed. His father's laughter, the warmth of his home, the safety he once took for granted. And then a surge of defiance sparked. He wasn't going to let fear control him. Not completely, not today. With every ounce of strength, Jaylen twisted and squirmed. His small hands found the edge of the seat in front of him, gripping like a lifeline. "Help me!" he gasped, his voice raw, cutting through the tense silence. Marcus lunged, reaching for him, but Monica tightened her hold, muttering something about discipline under her breath. The cruelty of her calmness made Jaylen's stomach churn with disbelief. Lisa, a few rows back, could no longer sit in silence. Her fingers trembled as she lifted her phone to record, her voice finally breaking through the cabin's suffocating tension. "Stop! You can't do this to a child!" she shouted. Some heads turned. A few passengers shifted, emboldened by her courage. That was the crack. The first ripple of change. Monica's hand faltered for a split second, and Jaylen seized it. With a desperate push, he freed himself partially, pulling the bag away just enough to gasp in jagged, terrified breaths. Marcus grabbed him immediately, wrapping his arms around his son, shielding him as if sheer willpower could keep the nightmare at bay. But Monica wasn't done. Her face twisted into a mask of authority, and she shouted at the cabin crew for interference, painting herself as the victim in this absurd, horrifying tableau. The passengers were split, some frozen by shock, others beginning to recognize the blatant injustice playing out before them. The power dynamics in that tiny, pressurized space became painfully clear. Authority wielded without accountability, and a child caught in the crossfire. Jaylen's fear was still a living, pulsing thing inside him, but now it mingled with something new: defiance. He remembered his father's words. "People's ignorance isn't your problem, son. Just make sure it never touches your heart." He gritted his teeth, his tiny fists clenching. He wouldn't let Monica's cruelty define him. He wouldn't disappear into fear. Marcus stood protectively in front of him, his voice booming now, demanding immediate action. "You're abusing him. Remove the bag, now!" Other passengers began to murmur, some recording on their phones. Monica's calm facade cracked, a flicker of panic crossing her face for the first time. She realized she was no longer untouchable. Then came the moment that would haunt everyone on board. Jaylen's eyes, wide with terror, met Monica's. There was a long, tense pause. The plane seemed to hold its breath. Every second stretched impossibly long. Would she relent or push further, testing just how far her authority could go? A sudden commotion erupted. A flight attendant, alerted by the cries and the growing unrest, stepped in firmly, grabbing Monica's arm. "Enough, step back!" The cabin erupted into chaos, passengers shouting, phones recording, and Jaylen finally able to pull the bag completely away from his face. He coughed violently, tears streaming down, shaking uncontrollably from the adrenaline, fear, and relief. Marcus hugged him tightly, whispering over and over, "It's okay. You're okay." Jaylen's body shivered in his father's arms, but for the first time in what felt like hours, he breathed freely. Lisa's hands were still shaking as she lowered her phone, realizing the full weight of what she had witnessed. Monica, finally subdued and escorted away by the crew, looked around with a mixture of fury and disbelief. She hadn't expected the collective defiance, the courage of one child, one parent, and a few brave passengers to challenge her authority. The balance of power had shifted, and for the first time, her control slipped completely. Jaylen's heart pounded, adrenaline still coursing through him, but he felt something else too: strength. The terror hadn't been erased, but it had been confronted. Fear had met courage, cruelty had met resistance, and in that moment, he realized that even in the most powerless position, one voice, one action, could make a difference. As the plane hummed steadily, carrying them through the sky, the cabin was alive with whispers, shock, and the lingering echo of injustice confronted. Jaylen sat trembling, wrapped in Marcus's arms, staring out the tiny window. Clouds drifted lazily by, indifferent to the storm that had passed inside. But the world outside didn't matter as much as the change inside him, an awareness that courage could rise even in the face of raw, unyielding prejudice. And just as calm seemed to settle over the cabin, a single thought pressed heavily on his mind. This isn't over. Not for him, not for the world outside these walls, and certainly not for those who think cruelty can ever go unchallenged. The cabin slowly returned to a tense calm, but the echoes of what had happened lingered like smoke in the air. Passengers whispered in quiet clusters, some sharing their relief, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Phones buzzed with recordings, messages sent to family and friends, the digital evidence of what had just unfolded in real time. Yet, amid all the chatter and shock, one figure remained the center of the story: Jaylen. Wrapped in his father Marcus's arms, Jaylen's body still trembled, adrenaline leaving his system in shivering waves. His mind replayed the suffocating terror of Monica's hands in the plastic bag. Every detail, the cold precision of her grip, the judgmental stares from some passengers, the feeling of helplessness, remained vivid. But now, interwoven with fear, there was a strange sense of power. He had survived, he had fought back, and courage had emerged from the shadows of panic. Marcus held him tightly, whispering, "You're safe now, son. You were so brave." Jaylen's small hands clung to his father's shirt, still shaking, still trying to grasp that the nightmare had passed. The words helped, but they could not erase the trauma completely. He knew that fear didn't just disappear. It lingered, a quiet echo that followed him. But now, he also understood that courage could rise even in the face of the darkest moments. Lisa, the passenger who had spoken up, lingered nearby, watching Jaylen regain some composure. She offered a reassuring smile, a subtle nod of solidarity. "You were amazing, kid," she said quietly. Most adults wouldn't have acted like that. You showed everyone what standing up even a little can do. Jaylen's lips quivered as he attempted a small smile. He didn't feel amazing, not yet. But the recognition from someone outside his immediate circle, a witness to his ordeal, made a difference. It reminded him that bravery didn't always need applause. Sometimes it was enough to simply be seen. The flight continued, but nothing felt ordinary anymore. Passengers avoided Monica, murmuring in disapproval as the crew moved to keep order. For the first time, her authority was challenged, and the ripple effect was clear. Cruelty, when unchecked, can thrive, but once confronted, it loses its power. The cabin became a small battleground of justice, a place where the courage of a child, a parent, and a bystander created tangible change. After landing, the ordeal extended beyond the plane. Airline authorities were notified. Monica faced an official investigation, and several passengers gave statements about what they had witnessed. Marcus held Jaylen's hand tightly through every step, reassuring him that this was part of making sure no other child would experience the same nightmare. Jaylen, still small and shaken, listened and tried to understand the broader implications. He realized that courage wasn't just about surviving in the moment. It was about creating accountability afterward, ensuring that injustice didn't continue unchecked. In the days that followed, the family returned home and life slowly began to regain a sense of normalcy. Jaylen drew again in his sketchbook, though his hands trembled at first. Each stroke, each line, was a small reclamation of control. Marcus noticed the subtle changes in his son, the quiet resilience growing beneath the surface. They talked about what had happened, not to frighten but to educate. There are people who judge without knowing, who act without thinking, Marcus explained. But you, Jaylen, proved that courage matters, that standing up, even in small ways, can challenge the cruelty of others. The story spread beyond their immediate circle. The recordings and witness statements circulated online, sparking conversations about the treatment of children, the abuse of authority, and the insidious nature of prejudice. Many people expressed outrage at Monica's actions, while others reflected on the responsibility of bystanders and society as a whole. Jaylen didn't fully understand the scope of the attention, but he felt the shift. His story mattered, and it had made a difference. Over time, Jaylen and Marcus noticed subtle changes in how people interacted with him. Some neighbors, who had once been indifferent or dismissive, began to offer warmth and encouragement. Teachers who might have overlooked moments of bullying became more vigilant and protective. Jaylen learned that courage could inspire others, that standing up in one moment could ripple outward, influencing behavior in ways that weren't immediately visible. The long-term impact on Monica was also clear. The investigation led to disciplinary action, public accountability, and professional consequences. The incident served as a stark reminder to others in positions of authority. Prejudice and cruelty are not invisible, and even in spaces where power feels absolute, accountability always exists. But perhaps the most important lessons were internal in Jaylen and Marcus. They learned that racism and prejudice were not abstract problems. They were lived experiences, moments of pain that could hit anyone. But they also learned that these forces could be resisted, confronted, and exposed. Unity, courage, and vigilance were weapons against hate, even when fear tried to paralyze the human spirit. Jaylen carried the scars of the incident. Yes, emotional bruises that reminded him of what had happened, but they became part of his growth. Each time he recounted the story, he felt a sense of empowerment. He understood now that survival was more than just enduring. It was asserting your humanity, demanding respect, and standing against cruelty, even when the world seemed silent. In the quiet moments, Marcus and Jaylen would talk about what had happened, dissecting it not with anger alone, but with purpose. They spoke of hope, of vigilance, of the responsibility each person had to stand against injustice. Courage, Marcus reminded him often, isn't the absence of fear. It's acting even when you're scared. You've shown that, Jaylen. Never forget it. And in the larger world, the lesson spread. Racism destroys families, prejudice weakens communities, and silence allows hate to flourish. But courage can confront cruelty, unity can heal wounds, and bravery can spark change. Jaylen had learned it in the most terrifying way imaginable. But he also embodied it. As the story settled into memory, one truth remained crystal clear. The world could be unjust, cruel, even terrifying. But one voice, one action, one refusal to stay silent could shift the balance. Jaylen's ordeal had ended, but the lessons would echo, not just for him, but for everyone who witnessed his courage. Because even in the face of fear, cruelty, and hatred, courage rises. And courage changes everything.